All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started this evening. Welcome to City Council meeting for Thursday, April 16th, 2020. Tonight, we just have a work session to discuss the budget. All members of the council are present with exception of Councilmember Jacob. And as usual, we are joined by Mayor Burton, and we will go ahead and proceed. It's not listed on the agenda, but we will start nonetheless with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll actually ask everyone who's a panelist if you could turn off your cameras momentarily so that we don't distract from the flag. And we'll have our pledge today, if it works right, by City Attorney Rob Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're able, please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. All right. Now, in order for us to proceed with the work session, we do need a motion to allow participation because, well, it's required by our city rules. Is there somebody from the council who's willing to make a motion?
If we don't make the motion, does that mean we can turn off and go home? I mean, stay home?
I think so, but I think that also means we have another extra meeting somewhere along the way to make up for it.
I'll move to approve the electronic participation in the meeting by the mayor, the staff, and any others called upon by the council chair.
We have a motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Lamb. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Make sure you're off mute. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, so now with that, we will move on to our work session, and we are going to have Denise Stack, Finance Director, leading the conversation tonight, along with Mayor Burton. So let me stop sharing, Denise, and turn it over to you.
Still disabled.
I'll fix it. Give me 2 seconds here.
Okay.
All right, that should be fixed now.
Councilmember Green, I worked hard on this presentation. Okay, is that shared?
Yeah, you're somewhat quiet.
Okay, let's pull me out. Is that better? Yes or no?
Seems about the same.
Let's see.
Is this better?
Whoa, yeah.
Okay. Oh, too much. All
We're
right.
good.
Okay, so if there's kids in the background, sorry. My house is a busy place. All right, so, and everyone sees the screen okay?
Yeah, except for we see the whole screen. We don't see just the one slide. We could see all of the slides.
The thumbnail page has got the 20.
There you go.
Great, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do first is we're going to go over some general fund information, and then we're going to go through each of the other utilities. We've already finished the solid waste, so we don't need to talk about that one again, but we'll go over some of the others and some of the projects that are listed and how we're going to accomplish what we need to keep those utilities solvent with as steady as and low rate increases as possible. So first thing we want to talk about is the general fund, and we're kind of going to walk you through how things have changed over the last 30 days or less. So the first thing we're going to do though is talk about our budget right now, the fiscal year 2020 budget. This is a before and after, right? So before March 11th, things were going well. We were estimating revenues being higher than expenses. Sales tax was coming in strong. And then all of the changes in the economy started changing, and COVID had its effect on us. So in essence, what we needed to do first is we needed to look at the estimates for this year and find out where those are going to be, and how that's going to affect our fund balance, because that's where we need to start next year. So the first thing that we did was property tax, for the most part, has come in, the majority of it. We have some delinquent taxes that typically come in the next couple months, but for the most part, we've gotten them all. We should be right on target. We haven't quite gotten that 15.9 million, but we're pretty close. Sales tax, we're estimating to have about $1 million shortfall from what we budgeted, which is about a 5 or 6% drop for that last quarter, to make up for that last quarter. And franchise taxes, we're actually budgeted too high. As I've performed some historical analysis on each of the revenue lines now, in response to preparing this year's budget coming up. I found that franchise taxes were not going to be even close to what they were budgeted. So we're reducing that estimate down. We'll be doing a budget amendment in late May, maybe the first meeting in June for this year's budget, in order to adjust these revenues to be more in line with what we actually think they'll come in at, as well as adjusting expenses. Our other revenues also have come down, and that has a lot to do with interest income. Interest is going to be lost for this last quarter. So we think that revenue to our budget to estimate is going to be about $1.7 million lower than we thought we would be, or where we budgeted we would be. Typically in a normal year, that's absolutely the opposite. Normally our budget is low and we get more revenues than we thought. This year, it's the opposite effect. It's one of the main reasons that you have reserves as well. All right, our expenses for this year, our personnel costs, I ran a quick analysis based on this last payroll and projected forward through June 30th, and we will be right at about a 3% savings for our personnel costs. So we did a really good job of budgeting those positions, and those positions have been full for the majority of the year. However, some of the actions that we're going to take over the next few months and the reduction in force will require that we pay out any accrued vacation, comp time, holiday hours that have not been used, that are in those employees' leave banks. So any of the employees that will be affected in the reduction in force, we believe that our payout for that leave time that's accrued by those employees is about $1 million. That's not something that we would budget on a normal basis, and that is a one-time expense. That's what will cost us to have those employees move on into other things. Operations look like they're coming in right at what we budgeted. Last year, we really forced our departments, which again, this is really different for West Jordan. Typically, operations were budgeted in a what-if world. Well, what if I need to do a study? What if I need this overtime? What if and instead last year in 2020, we really said, departments, we need you to tell us what you're really gonna do, not what if you could do it. And they really did come to the table, and that's why you're seeing these budgets come in right where they're budgeted, not because of the typical myth of government spending. If you have it, they spend it. That's absolutely not the case. The department heads came to the table and said, this is really what we need to do the job. And so we don't have as much wiggle room as we've had in the past. Capital and leases, the majority of that, over 50% of that, is the police lease vehicle program. And then the rest of it is our fleet replacement costs for the rest of our vehicles in the city. And so that obviously is going to be exactly what it was budgeted at. Debt service is what it was budgeted at. And then allocated services are personnel and operations that get transferred to the other funds for administrative overhead or project management. If personnel reduces, then obviously allocated costs would reduce as well. So we won't get that additional money back. So in essence, we're going to come in right at our expense budget. $80,000, that's nothing. So between the two, we're going to see a drop of 1.6 million from what we budgeted. We thought we would drop our reserves 2.1. We're actually going to be dropping reserves about 3.8 million. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this information or what we're sharing?
And just a reminder that since we're having a workshop, there's no need to wait to be called on by the chair. So feel free to speak up.
This is Councilmember Lamb. So I want to talk about the leave payouts real quick. So obviously that number there is kind of is that a guesstimate right now, or are you at a point now where you think that's what it will be?
I'm at a point now where I believe that's where it will be. I do have identified positions and more specifics that we did the majority of the calculations today.
So my question is, if you kind of have an idea that that's where it will be at, does that mean if we have more layoffs after July 1st, will that number be higher?
Well, this would be layoffs that occur before July 1st. If you're right, if we have to do another mid-year adjustment next year, we would have more leave payouts, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so this is really important because this is kind of our starting place, right? Because as we go into next year, this is where we start. Yes.
Sorry, can you explain to the council what's included in that leave payout? Just so everyone, make sure everyone understands what that is.
Absolutely. So if an employee is either has taken the voluntary reduction in force offer or they have an involuntary reduction in force and they're eligible for retirement and they choose to do retirement, then the city has a sick leave retiree payout. That would be that we put the sick leave money into a special bank, and that pays for insurance premiums for those employees to pay their premiums and stay on the city's insurance, or they can receive a medical cash out. And that's typically for employees that have been with the city for longer than 10 years. Between 10 and 15 years, they get 50% of that. If they're there between 15 and 19 years, they get 60% of that. And then if they've been there longer than 20 years, they get 70% of that. There's a lot of banks for those leave payouts that are really big for sick leave. In addition, it would be any vacation hours that they can keep and roll over. The city doesn't force the employees to take their vacation time. And so some of those vacation leave banks are quite large. In addition, it would be comp time, which would be what they would take in excess of overtime. Instead of being paid overtime, they get those hours into a bank that they could take leave. Those get paid out at termination. And for the police officers and firefighters, there's also a holiday bank. They're loaded a holiday bank. And because most of them work on the holidays, they can take their holidays on a different day. So if they have a holiday bank, that's also paid out. Is that what you were asking, Corbin? Okay. All right, so now we're going to move into next year. So a before and after. This first column is before March 11th. I mean, this is actually my March 11th presentation, that column is. We were talking about, all right, we have kind of a budget imbalance and we want to get this in better shape. And how do we do that? And we were talking about how to do that. We knew we had about a $5.1 million difference there. And then about March 30th, we started making some different assumptions and recognized that our revenue was going to come in shorter. And so this blue, this 23.7, which we thought was our sales tax, that's how our trajectory has been going for quite a while, actually was going to get hit hard. And so we brought that down 15% to 18.95 million. So that lost us some revenue. And then our costs were still the same at that point, right? Because we didn't know how were we going to react to this. We just knew what revenue was going to do, not really what we were going to solve this problem with. And so our problem became a much larger problem, close to $10 million. Today, actually, we received a report from Salt Lake County on their sales tax assumptions, and they had several different scenarios on there, but they called one an optimistic scenario. And they're saying that next year they'll see about a year-to-year loss of 6%. And their pessimistic scenario was 23%. The mayor forwarded that study to me, and I said, well, that's interesting because I landed smack in the middle of optimistic and pessimistic. So I was joking with the mayor that I guess that makes me realistic, but I'm not sure. So we're landing smack in the middle of scenarios that many others are running the same kinds of analysis, and we're right in line with them. So I don't think that we're too pessimistic in what we're losing there. All right. The mayor asked when we met, and we've talked to many, we've talked to members in the community. We had a citizens budget committee put together on a Zoom meeting. We've talked to council members, we've talked to staff, we've talked to department heads, talked to the mayor, and we really got all of those scenarios together. The mayor chose to take what we call a balanced approach to this, to solve this problem. He recognized that there was no way for this problem to be accomplished with just one solution to just cut costs. I don't think it's possible in the city's size and the revenue stream that we have for us to cut 20% of everything. So the mayor said, all right, let's first decrease expenses. Let's try and figure out what we can do. So the first thing we tackled was obviously no wage increases, no step plan, no merit plan, no cost of living increases, nothing of that sort. There are no wage increases in this budget. The second step was much more difficult for us to decide on, and that was that reduction in force that we'll be doing over the next few weeks. The next one was a little easier. It's usually the first thing we all looked at was change our program from a cap or a operating lease for the police vehicles to a buy program, and to keep those vehicles not just 3 years, but to keep them 5 years. So we'll be transitioning in that. That was part of the savings. We found some service levels that we could reduce that we believe that we can still provide a decent level of service to the community, but we'll have to scale back some of the costs. Some of those would be like events or parks, parks maintenance, the park seasonals, those kinds of things. And then the last thing we did was we took away the transportation tax that came in. It was a brand new revenue source to the city last year. Instead of transferring that over to our roads capital fund, which would really be best practice for us, we decided that that funding could be eligible to fund our streets department right now. So we're keeping that in the general fund, we're keeping it close, and that will provide that revenue stream for the streets department. So that was how we accomplished about 45% of that gap that we needed to close. The next thing the mayor did was say that he was in favor of trying to increase revenues, and we talked.
Denise, can I go back to the decreased expenses real quick?
Yeah.
So on reduction in force, I don't need a full number, but can you give me a percentage of reduction in force? Is it
A percentage,
10%?
like employees to?
Like how many people are we losing next year that we currently have? The reason I bring that up is because I've had very many questions about all these layoffs from West Jordan. I don't know if I need a number today, but I'd like to know, did we lose 5% of our workforce, or is this something that you can give us later on?
There are.
Like if I have 100 employees right now for the city, am I losing 10?
You're losing 28 actual employees, and
how many of those 28
13,
are currently vacant?
That's what I was saying, and 13 vacant positions. So the combined number.
So is it 28 plus 13 or
41?
13? Okay.
41.
And Denise, David back here. Thank you. I had the same question, but on a different tack. What is the ratio of voluntary retirement, so reduction in force, people who chose to retire versus, and lumped in there too, the people that the mayor was planning on due to various considerations anyway, having an employee be terminated or consolidating positions where it was a necessary thing that was going to happen as well. Because I know in that meeting that we talked about, there's voluntary, hey, would you like to retire early? And then also there are positions that we were going to consolidate anyway. And and move things around. So
David.
are we still saying that that's the reduction in force? Is it all voluntary and necessary, or are there other cuts in positions?
There
Councilman
are other
Pack,
cuts.
yeah, let me answer that. We're not quite done yet working through the voluntary reduction in force process. So I can give you a more specific answer in a couple of weeks, but unfortunately, there will be some involuntary. Some of the cuts will have to be involuntary because we didn't have, we had some step forward through the voluntary process, a number of them, and we're doing everything we can to take care of these cuts through vacancies, but there still will be a few that are that will be involuntary. I'll give you a specific number when we are through the through the voluntary reduction in force process here by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you. And then just to double check, it is probably still the majority of people who decided to retire on their own, and or changes that would have happened anyway, or whether we had coronavirus or not.
That's a little more difficult to answer because as you
Okay.
saw prior to the coronavirus, we still had a $5 million gap or $4 million gap. So exactly how much of the cuts is attributable to the coronavirus and how much is attributable to just the fact that we were needing to tighten our belt regardless and find ways to be more efficient and more effective throughout the organization regardless. Let me work through that, and I can give you a better answer to that.
Great, thanks so much.
While we're paused, I have a question on, Denise, you mentioned the citizen group. Can we find out who those participants were?
Sure. We can email you a list of who they were.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go down to increased revenues. The first thing that we did was talk to everyone about what kind of revenues we could increase, and we gave several options, and there are several options out there. The mayor landed on a transfer in from the utility funds. So in essence, a dividend back from the utilities. He felt like this was a really balanced approach because there are many properties that are within our city, about 25% of our city, that is actually considered tax exempt. So should you do a tax increase, those entities would be unaffected, whereas they are very participatory in utilities. Sometimes they're our largest utility users. Therefore, if we do a small transfer in from each of the utilities into the general fund, it allows a more even sharing of the burden in the general fund. So we felt like that was a good solution, and that came up with 25% of the solution to this problem that we have. The transfer in is the same for all the utilities, and it was at 5%. And then the last thing that we wanted to do is make sure that we also said we know that some of this is one time. We knew we started out behind the 8 ball, so to speak, with a big problem before COVID hit that we were trying to solve, but we believe that COVID also has an effect, and that we hope that it's a temporary problem that won't be very long term. Therefore, the mayor decided to say, I'm okay using about $3 million of reserves. So that came up with 30% of the solution. Let me show you what that looks like. This is kind of that mix, right? The majority of how we're solving this problem, or how we're going to present a budget to you, is that 44% of getting us balanced or into a better situation was decreasing expense. We did everything we could, and we looked in every corner. 31% is using reserves or our rainy day fund, and 25% is increasing revenues.
And Denise, if I might interrupt for just a moment.
Sure.
Council, if you look at these numbers that she's presenting, I took a lot of this from the information that you provided for us. Each one of you were a little bit different, so none of these are going to look like exactly what you asked for, but all of it has some of what you asked for in there. So I've taken the mix, and I'm hoping this is close to what you were looking for, because I want the budget, when it comes to you, to resemble something that you wanted and you liked. If you feel, as you're looking at this and you see that it's strongly different than what you would like to see, please let us know, because we want to adjust it now. I think it's easier now to adjust it than after you adopt it. So I wanted to make it as close as I can to what you can live with.
Thank you, Mayor. David Pack here. I was wondering, with that, then that great Excel spreadsheet that Ms. Steck and you had when you were meeting with us, if we could maybe have that at the end of everything, not necessarily tonight, but that might help be able to see, okay, well, where are we exactly? Because that was so nice just to have everything on one spreadsheet right there to be able to compare and contrast, if that would be possible.
Yeah, I think you could send that to him, couldn't you, Denise? Do you have that?
I certainly can. I have it all summarized based on who responded. I'd like to take out names. I would rather it be like council member A, B, C, or D. But I will definitely share that so you can see where your peers were and how they landed.
Okay, C is for Chad.
As well as the citizens, which I think that's important input, and the department heads, so you can kind of see where we all are.
Thank you.
Yeah. We had the department heads do the scenario. We had citizens do the scenario. We had each council member do the scenario. And then
we forced the mayor to do the scenario.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So my question is, with the current budget, the one that ends June 30th.
So back here,
So are we saying that we're tapping into the reserves with this year at 3.8 and next year we're talking about
another 2 or 3? Yes.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a slide on that in just a moment here, Councilmember Green.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with going to 7 million out of our reserve fund, but okay.
All right, so this would be the mayor's budget and how it's progressed over time. So this was from the slide before, from before March 11th. We've been meeting, and I felt like we made such good progress, and then this happened. This is the budget about March 30th. We knew that there was a revenue gap that we just showed you with that $9.8 million. Now this last column will be the mayor's budget unless he changes it over the next week. This shows the progress that we made between that first budget and now. So what was happening March 11th and now where the mayor's budget has landed. So you can see the reduction of sales tax of $4.7 million. And there's the transfer in that the mayor had from the utility funds. This is the reduction of personnel, the reduction in operations. A lot of this has to do with events and park seasonals. Capital leases, this is the savings from changing to a buy, from a lease to a buy. We believe that next year we'll have about, not yet next year, after this first cycle, it'll likely be more like $500,000, but there'll be some transition costs this year. Allocated services decreased by about $1.7 million, and transfers out, we took them away. So we had intended originally to use the sales tax from transportation to push over to road capital. But because of the situation, we decided to keep them back in the general fund. I think it's really important to note that this transfer in revenue of $2.479 million and these allocated services, which is a reduction of cost to the utilities because of the reduction of cost in personnel and operations, are almost an offset to each other. So while you may see a transfer in of a 5% dividend from utilities, we also have eliminated some of the expense in those same exact funds because of the reductions in the general fund for overhead. So the difference between the two is really only about $700,000. Does that make sense? Okay. Revenues to expense, this is just in chart format. Corbin always gives me a hard time. He's like, don't just put numbers up. I'm like, okay, colors and pictures and numbers. So this is a chart, revenue to expenses. You can see what our history has been, right? We almost always come in with revenue above expense. Those first 2 years are actual numbers. And this is in millions of dollars. Then our budget typically had expense above revenue. And then the estimate, that's what happened when COVID hit. We reduced our revenues and our expenses have stayed the same because it takes time to react to this kind of a thing. These other two columns are just to show you where we were, right? So the work happened. So we thought March 11th, we'd have more revenue. So you could see that growth there. And we also had more growth in expense. And then COVID hit and we adjusted our revenues, but we had yet to really tackle the big problem of our expense problem. So again, this last column is now how the mayor's budget will be presented to you, that we've brought in that additional revenue and we've cut our expenses tremendously.
Go back to that slide again.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so reserves. This is on everybody's mind right now. So let me explain what a percentage of reserves means. The state has set a boundary and said you can only have a maximum of 25% of your year's revenues, less transfers in. Transfers in are called extra. 25%. You can't get above that. Now, I have gotten above that in other cities, and there are other cities that have above that. You just get an audit finding because you have more rainy day funds than the state thinks that you should have. That's actually helpful to some of the cities right now because there's some of them that were in their 30%. But 25% is supposed to be where we are. No lower than 5%, right? So you can see over on the left here that I've told you what percentage of fund balance you had each of those years. And then you can see the millions of dollars. We ended 2019 with $12.5 million. We're going to be using reserves this year as sales tax declines. And then we'll be using reserves again. So our reserves will be about $5.7 million adopting this current mayor's budget. This green line at the bottom is the state required reserve. So you can see how close we are to hitting that minimum. If we continued with the same exact budget next year without making one change, again, we would be dropping to almost the place where we would hit that state minimum.
Only having 2.2 million in a reserve, given what we've seen recently, scares me. I mean, that's not even enough to fix some broken water mains in the city if we had an earthquake.
If we had an earthquake?
I'm talking about one that caused some damage. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. Do we see, if we were to look into our magic crystal ball for FY22, where are we going to be?
Well, if we were using the Great Recession recovery, we saw 2 years of fall and then a gentle rise. Reading national economists, they're thinking this is going to be more of a V than a U. So we hope that this would be our only fall and then we would be starting back up. It's the starting back up that's hard. Because while you can say we lost 15% of sales tax revenue, typical growth is 5 to 6%, sometimes and slower when you're just starting, right? So it's usually 1 or 2%. Well, you're starting from a lower number, so that 5% is even lower than it would have been if it were 5% of a higher number. So that trajectory to get up typically takes us at least 4 to 5 years to get right back to the same place that we were before.
Can I chime in here too? Part of the issue is every year we go that we have a budget where we're budgeting right from the start to take money out of rainy day fund or out of reserves, where from day one, we're assuming that our expenses are going to be above our revenues. we're starting out in that hole. And so we have to, right from the beginning, rely on salary savings, rely on turnover savings, rely on cuts in operations throughout the year, just to try to not go into the rainy day fund as much as was planned for. So although I'm really supportive of this budget that we're putting together, this budget that we're putting together is not a true balanced budget, because we are still, with all the cuts we're proposing and the revenue we're proposing to raise, we're still planning to take $3 million out of rainy day funds. And if we do everything according to budget, that fund balance will drop by another $3 million, as Denise was just saying. And so we have got to, we have really got to get our expenses, our ongoing expenses, in line with our ongoing revenues.
The difficulty that I'm seeing is FY19, we have 12, and we're going to be dropping almost, well, we are dropping almost 7 million over a two-year budget. And I'm going to tell you that we're never going to see, based on the way that we're going, we're never going to see our percent of our reserves up at the 22% in any reasonable amount of time, because we're already operating in the hole at 3 million this year. There's no way on this planet that we're going to make up 3 million plus another 7 to bring that back up to anything reasonable in the next 4 or 5 years. And honestly, I think we're on a dangerous trajectory. And I don't know. I think we're, and
Calvin, let me throw something out that's not going to be super popular, because I already know that, because I already talked to multiple people about it. You know, we have an art center that it has $6 million. It's earmarked for it. You and I've had this discussion of possible ways to do some things that don't cost as much. I can tell you, in my home, you know, we're looking at my husband's business taking a huge decline, and we had some things planned. I mean, we had some trips, we had some purchases, and we're not doing them now. And, you know, this money is my money just as much as it's yours. You live here, you pay taxes. And when I do a budget for my home, I'm looking at, I'm not doing anything new. I'm not going to go build anything. I'm not going to go buy anything. I'm not going to plan those trips that I wanted to do, because I got to make sure I can put food on my table and I can pay my basic bills. And I look at this budget and I see that really the same way. We got to make sure we're paying our basic bills. We got to make sure we're getting our people paid, that we still can keep the lights on. We can still keep the water flowing. You know, in essence, right now, we don't have any business in building an art center. I have other issues with the art center based on where it's located and the fact that it's going to cost us once the thing is built, because we have to keep it maintained and we have to run it. And so I'd really like to put that on the table. I'm not sure if there's some other things similar to that we can put on the table and say, maybe we just need to back off right now and use that money for some other things, or at least part of it, because we really don't have any business doing those kinds of things in this state. Right now, we really got to get in the mindset that we don't plan the trips, we don't buy the new cars, we don't do that stuff. And building that building is that shiny new car or that really cool vacation, because it's not a necessity right now. So unpopular as it is, I'm throwing it out there. Or popular, maybe.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to double check. So we're not talking tonight about I mean, I could see that we'd be here all night if we're going to talk about what to, you know, what specific things to fund and
no,
not
I just
fund.
wanted to throw it out there. So if you had it, you know,
Okay, because yeah, the arts facility would be a all-night discussion in itself.
That, and I mean, if there's other things similar to that, I'm saying, if there are things that are on the table for the new year to cost a lot, maybe we need to just relook at those things. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge conversation of yes, no, you know, it's just, I wanted to throw that out there to let's think about those things.
Council, if it's okay, let me propose, so we can keep going tonight. Let me propose that I give you a memo that's kind of outlines the pros and cons of continuing or stopping on the Arts Center, if that's okay. And then you can look at that list and then have further discussion, if that's all right.
That'd be great. And then if you do have other projects that are similar to something like that, that maybe to be put on the list, you could look at those as well.
That's the only project I'm aware of that's a significant amount of money that is not statutorily restricted or earmarked. That is earmarked. It was earmarked, but it was earmarked by the city council. So it could be kind of undone by the city council. All the other funds are like impact fees, enterprise fund, capital projects, those types of things, which can't be used to cover this general fund shortfall.
Okay.
Okay, so I believe that was the last of the general fund discussion. Is there anything else that we want to talk about the general fund? Okay, so that's a kind of a glimpse into what the mayor's budget is going to look like when he presents it to you in the first meeting in May. And then it becomes your budget and we begin working on anything that you want to change in that budget, or if there's anything that you want to change in that budget. But I will be available for you during that time period to walk you through the budget, answer any questions that you have. All right, so next we're going to just kind of go through all of the utility funds or the enterprise funds. We're going to start with the streetlight fund because I think that at least this one accomplishes some of the things that you wanted to do even before COVID. And I think that it's also going to assist our city as well in seeing some improvements even in a difficult time. So the streetlight fund, you know, has been building and building and building its balance, and now it's time for us that we have enough that we can do some projects. So this is your project list, and this is your project list for the next 5 years. There are a lot of projects for this next year, about $1 million worth, and then an average of between $300,000 and $400,000 a year after that. So does anyone have any questions about these? These are kind of exciting, and Public Works is really excited to start getting some of the street light problems taken care of and some brighter lights. And let me assure you that they're also using the most energy efficient lighting possible, and that will also reduce, especially if it's a replacement, the energy cost for street lights as well.
I have a question.
There's Bagley Industrial.
Corbin, I don't know that.
I have a question about the soccer complex. What are we lighting the soccer complex for? And what are we spending $80,000 on the soccer complex, considering 2 years after that, we got to plow it all up anyway?
So let me comment on Bagley Industrial Area. That's out by Boeing. That's a road where some of the lights were installed, but the connections weren't completed and not all the lights were in. So we're going to do some more work out there. The soccer complex, I can't remember the lighting project on the soccer complex at this time. Councilman Jacob, we'll get back to you with some more specifics. This is kind of the prioritized list based on a number of factors, but I can get you more specifics from Public Works. Brian, I'm sure, has that information and we can share that with you.
So what about those lights that are over by Itinerus that were requested? Track station Itinerus.
My understanding, those lights are being installed now or have already been installed.
They
Perfect.
are in progress. The pole bases will be poured today or tomorrow, and the lights should be installed next week. So by the end of next week, they should be working.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I sent you a text just now because I thought of it when this came up. Oh, I didn't get back to Kayleen, so Councilman Whitelock, so I apologize for the delay.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, so this is the fund balance. So you can see this fee I'm sorry, was there someone else that had a question?
Yeah, This is Councilmember McConaughey. I was curious on the project list for the lights. When we started this originally, we took a sizable bond. We did what we could. Then when that project ended, the comment was that, or the plan was that we were going to see about acquiring the Rocky Mountain Power lights and the UDOT lights to see if we could convert them. And then we were going to start backfilling the dark areas after that had been completed, because we're hoping to see additional savings from upgrading those lights. Is this
It has, those are included in this first year's list.
And some of that is being done currently in the current fiscal year as well, Councilman McConaughey.
Cool.
That's my understanding. So, yeah.
Okay, so this is a fund balance, and you implemented the fee back in the end of fiscal year 2016. So you started with a fund balance, and then you kind of just built, and now it's time that we've got enough money in there that we can really get some projects moving forward. So you can see that we built it, and now we're going to bring it down a bit. This is a summary of revenue to expenses for that fund. You're going to see the same slide for each, and the same kind of slides for each of the utilities. So kind of get used to them. The revenue per year is about $750,000, and the expenses for this year are $1.5 million. It's about $400,000 for all of the other things that go on, like maintenance and electricity for this fund. So here's a quick summary of this fund for the last 2 years actual, what we estimate for this year, and then the budget that will be proposed to you. You'll note that it brings in that $750 maintenance cost, or about $215,000 a year. Electricity is about $173,000 a year. Facilities, that's the portion of the public works building that is dedicated to STREETLIGHT, inventory, the trucks that maintain them, that kind of thing. It's a very small amount. And then these are your projects, and then the transfer to the general fund of the 5%. So you can see that fund balance was building, and then now we're taking it down a bit. This is the 5-year plan financially. So we just showed you on the project list the 5-year plan there, but this is a financial 5-year plan. Council, we want you to know in this budget that each of the funds is going to have a 5-year plan for you, so that you can see that we have a plan going forward. We're not going to just surprise, huge rate increases in a utility. We're going to try and stabilize those expenses so that we don't see that fluctuation that you've seen in the past. So you can see the top line is the beginning fund balance for each year. Bottom line is the ending fund balance for each year. And then these represent just inflationary cost increases. So we would anticipate a 2.5% rate increase in the STREETLIGHT fund after this next fiscal year. Nothing this next year, but following in 2022, 23, 24, and 25, we would have 2.5% per year. I inflated maintenance at 3.5% because we're adding lights. Electricity at 3.5% because we're adding lights. Facilities, that's an actual cost. And then projects and a transfer of the 5% to the general fund. So you can see that that fund stays pretty solvent, maintains about a $400,000 fund balance using this plan. All right, any questions about the STREETLIGHT fund? Comments? We're going to go to the water utility. We have done a lot of work on the water fund over the last 6 months. So this is representative of all the work that you did. There are no changes outside of that except for the transfer to the general fund. This is the fee schedule. We're going to just flip through these pretty quickly. You should be super familiar with these. These are ones that we worked on together. And it was interesting having listened to Jordan Valley last night, and somebody made a comment, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which council member, that said, well, that tier 5 or that highest tier should be really high to pay for that possibility of us using in excess of 20% of our allowable water. So that is the tier 5 rate. It's $4.75 per 1,000 gallons, and it's lower than Kearns Improvement District, but it's still a lot higher than the highest tier was in the previous rate schedule. We anticipate these rate schedules or these fee schedules to go into effect. They will be in your budget and we will have them adopted by you, but they will go in effect on October 1st for this one. Then this is the commercial rate schedule. Again, same things we've worked through. The landscapes, you can see I put on one side, the left side is what it is right now through September 30th of 2020. And then on the right side is what it will go to. Landscape has one of the biggest changes in that they were not participating in the cost of meters. So we did change that, and we discussed that quite extensively before. These are the other fees. Hydrant meter rentals, we talked about increasing those, and we did. We have set a city use rate, which means that we will have a 50% discount based on our meter type from our fee schedule, and our wholesale rate will be $1.95 per 1,000 gallons. That is the Jordan Valley rate per gallon plus 15% overhead. And then the other fees were also adjusted slightly to compensate for the amount of time that's gone on since they were set, which was about 12 years ago. As well as this one, this is the meter installation costs. So again, we just adjusted them for what inflation has occurred since they were last set. All right, so fund balance for this fund. I want you to know this is where there's been a lot of confusion, and I hope this chart helps a little anyway. This is an ending fund balance each year, but what's important is that green piece, that was the amount of that fund balance that was bond proceeds. They weren't in the fund. It didn't count. You issued debt, but it hadn't been spent yet. So it's almost like you took out a cash advance on a credit card, but you hadn't bought what you intended to buy with the cash. So a lot of times I've heard, well, we used to have $11 million in the water fund. Where did it all go? Well, we had $11 million, but we issued 10 million of that was debt that was intended to build 2 water tanks, which are now being built and will be done before this fiscal year is over. So I think that's really important. So that blue area is really what your reserves were, that bottom line. In 2017, they were $4.6 million. In 2018, they were $1.4 million. In 2019, they were $530,000. And then in 2020, they'll be $473,000. This next budget, we tried to bring that fund balance up a bit, and we're increasing it to $725,000. And that's just with that rate redistribution. So this is revenues to expense. So you can see that purple piece, that's the bond. That's when you issued the bond. So revenue is blue lines, green is expenses, and you can see where they have gone. Those expenses include a lot of maintenance projects as well. So they will include that. And this is a summary that we excluded any of the bond activity in there. So I just took all that bond activity out and said, all right, what were we doing? 2018, we did quite a few projects that actually dropped our fund balance substantially. So that's kind of what happened. And then in 2019, you adjusted the rates. And then we've just looked at those rates, used the same revenue estimates from how you've adjusted the rates and moved them a little bit around. You can see in 2020, this year, we think that we're going to increase on fund balance by about $86,000, which is a good trend after the last 2 years, and then increase fund balance another 105. Our project list. Now, this is where we took control of everything. So we worked closely with Public Works, and I really appreciate partnering with them. They really had never had really good financial information to make some decisions. And so they were making decisions kind of in a bubble. We're working so well together now. So what I told poor Dave Murphy, he's so used to not being able to do whatever he kind of wanted to do with projects. I said, you have a budget. I'm sorry, you have a $4 million budget a year. That's all you can do. And that was hard. So, but he stuck to it, and he has prioritized his projects so that he will only be spending $4 million a year. That gives us a sustainable water program going forward so that we don't have large rate increases going forward. This is the project list. Next year, the only project that we'll be doing in the water fund outside of normal maintenance is that airport water tank. It is important for us to replace that, and we'll be replacing a smaller tank with a larger tank. And it is one of the projects that we're required to do right now.
So there is no surplus in the water plan?
Say it again.
There's no surplus in the water budget?
There will be some surplus, yes,
How much?
right here. So
Okay.
ending
Thank you.
next year, there you go. You got your answer. All right. So we're going to start with 620. We've got water sales. We will be increasing the rate 2% per year to keep up. And then impact fees are pretty much historical. That's where they've come in. If they don't come in, then we don't do a project. So that's how those are. And then personnel costs I've increased, operations, water purchase I increased, but after last night's presentation, I'm a little worried about that number. We're really going to have to figure out what that's really going to look like for our city overall. Debt service is what it is, capital leases are what they are, and then shared services walk hand in hand with operations and personnel. So you can see it does have a fund balance. It stays pretty steady for the most part, using that $4 million budget for projects, which was really important for us to maintain that cash flow in the water fund. Are there any questions or comments about how we're managing this?
Yes, please, Denise. David Pack here. You mentioned the 2% on water sales. I know in previous workshops, we discussed the possibility of, well, the viability of, and of course we need to discuss it as a council, but having these small incremental increases instead of having to defer and having a large increase. Is there anything in here that you would like to express relative to that?
Yes, that 2% are those small incremental increases. So every year we will be adjusting the rates up 2%. So you can see that revenue increases 2% each year.
Right, and that was my assumption. You're talking about a compounded 2%.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think this is what you were looking for, and this is really what the mayor was looking for as well for the water fund. All right, stormwater utility. This is the fee schedule. We're doing a small rate increase to manage the projects that are required for the stormwater fund. We're going from $5.58 per month to $5.86 per month in the stormwater fund. It's much more modest than the Raftella study required. The Raftella study recommended 24% each year for 3 straight years. We have brought that back by managing the project schedule. This is the fund balance for the stormwater fund. You can see in 17, it was 8.8 million. And then we've been hitting the projects pretty well. Brought it down to 5.5, 5.1, 4.7, and then 3.3. Here's the summary that we talked about, revenue to expense. Blue lines are revenue, green lines are expense. So you can see in 18, why that fund balance dropped was we did quite a few projects in there. And then fund balance dropped again in 19, dropped again in 20, and will drop again in 21 as well. But again, it has to do with our project list. This is a summary of what will happen in that fund per year, historically, and then the mayor's budget. So we're going to be using $1.3 million of reserves. We've got about $2.5 million of projects in there. That's the budget that I gave to Public Works. I said that I felt like we could manage $2.5 million of projects every year going forward. So you'll see where we're going to do that. So going forward, this will be the project list. So this project list was a lot longer before we kind of put some reins in on the projects. So you can see how those are moving forward. What we do need to let you know is with this more graduated approach of managing projects, there are quite a long list of what we would consider unfunded projects. And they will be provided to you in the budget book. So you'll see these are funded. These are ones that we intend to fund and that we feel like financially sustainably we can fund. Here is the list that's identified in the master plan that are also maybe important projects, but they don't have as high a priority, and they will be taken care of as we have funding available. And then this is the 5-year financial plan for the stormwater fund. Now the stormwater fund, I'm not able to do the same increase per year just because of the way the cash flow is working. So this year we'll end with $3.3 million. We did a 5% rate increase where you saw that $5.58 to $5.86. And then the next year, for the next 4 years, we'll need to do 10%, which will be about 50 cents per year per resident, or per month, I'm sorry, 50 cents per month per resident, in order to manage the project list that we have and maintain a decent fund balance in this fund. We need some wiggle room in stormwater, because this is really where, if you have a large event, you need to have reserves. And I have experience in this one in that when I was in Draper and we had the large flood and the stormwater system was failing and homes were flooded and that kind of thing occurred. There was a lot of damage that occurred during that time. This is the fund that manages that damage. So we really need to make sure that we have some reserves in it to do that.
Yeah. This is Chris. Thank you. I love the stormwater guys. They do fantastic work, but I'm so sick of seeing them in District 1 all the time. So thank you.
Good. All right, wastewater. This is your sewer fund. A lot of this revolves around South Valley Water Reclamation District, or facility, not district, facility, and the requirements from the federal government on how we manage sewer now and how that's processed. So we have quite a bit of, ooh, this is not looking like I want it to. That is not the right slide. I apologize. That's the stormwater slide. I should have replaced that. We are going to do a slight increase in the sewer fund, but we'll go through that here in just a moment. So the fund balance is going to be reduced quite substantially in order not to manage a rate increase in this, and because of the project lists that are going, but we'll go over those in just a moment. So the sewer fund will have a very low fund balance. The good part to this is that we have minimal liability here. The majority of the work from the sewer is done by the facility, and the majority of the main lines are owned by the facility. These assumptions include quite a bit of maintenance to our own lines, as well as our contribution to the facility and it moving forward. This is a summary of our revenue to expense. You can see we'll be bringing in about $13 million into this fund, and we'll be spending about $16.6 million in this fund. This is what that looks like. So the stormwater fees will go up slightly. And I think it's 15%. Or I'm sorry, the sewer fee will go up 15%. I'm positive it's 15%. So that will be up 15%, and then impact fees are whatever they come in at, and that's 13.1 million. And then our expenses are personnel, administration, operations, which includes the processing fee for South Valley Water, our capital leases, and then our project list, and then a transfer to the general fund. So you can see we're bringing that fund balance down substantially. $8 million was a really high fund balance for a $12 million revenue company. So I think what happened is that they just kind of knew that that South Valley project was coming, and so got rates at an appropriate level in order to make sure that we had enough cash flow and didn't have those rates just skyrocket at some point. This is our project list for the next 5 years. Those first 3 lines, those big lines, that is South Valley Water Reclamation Facility. It's the expansion, our participation in the expansion of the plant, and then our participation in the phosphorus and grit removal requirement by the federal government. They're doing a good job at getting all of that work done. And then we also have a slip line project that is pretty expensive as well. Those are things we can't really control cost to. The other projects are things that we can kind of say, all right, can we time those right? So we worked again with Public Works, and you can see we have a system maintenance line of about $650,000 to $800,000 a year for our lines in the system. A master plan update in 2025. I think they just finished one not that long ago, so they really didn't need one. We have developer reimbursements. That's if a developer was required to upsize for his development to occur. We reimburse them when we have those funds available. And then we have several pipeline projects and pipe extensions that are going on next year. Then you can see that kind of slows down to a normal pace so that we can maintain the cash flow in this fund. This is our 5-year plan. So I know you saw that dip pretty low, and that was a little hard for me, but it's going to dip low and then we're going to start building again. So you can see that's why I kind of made that determination to hold those projects at a steady level of between $3 and $4 million, or around $4 million as an average. We will require 3 years of 15% rate increases for the sewer fund. There's really no way around that for us to maintain a cash flow. We can reassess the needs of the sewer fund after 2024 when there's no rate increases needed for 2 straight years and we're still gaining some momentum there. So we may be able to relook at that rate at that time.
How much does that affect the normal household when you're talking 15%?
We're talking about, this is the water. Look, you were like led right in for me. Thanks. This is what it looks like, right? So everything that we're proposing, this is a utility bill comparison, right? So we rearranged the rates, and you know that we worked hard on that. We reduced the base rate. This is a residential user using 4,000 gallons a month, which is typically what a residence, actually generous. Most residences are between 2,000 and 4,000 gallons a month in the winter. So this is kind of like a winter bill for our residents. We reduced the base rate by $15.35, and we adjusted the usage rate. So that's for those first 4,000 gallons. This would be what the change in the sewer rate fee would look like at 15% and the use. So the sewer fee has a base rate, and then usage is based on winter use, average winter use. Most people are not above that won't be above that $8. So their sewer piece of their bill would be about $20 a month. Water piece of their bill would be $29 a month. Stormwater would be about $586. It's going up 5%. Streetlight is the same at $1.71. And solid waste would be going up from, which we talked about last night, from $16.04 to $17.25 and have an 8% increase. Overall, a utility bill in the winter would decrease by 10%.
Denise, you said the sewer bill would be about $20. I think you meant $30.
I did mean 30, 29 and 30. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
It's stage fright. I'm kidding. Okay, are there any comments or questions about how and why and what we've done with the utility funds? Okay, guess what? I'm done. So is there anything else that you would like to talk about? I can't believe we got through that so quick.
Can you go over it one more time so we can use our 3 hours?
Okay, there you go.
So the solid waste, from the discussion that we had last night, that number that you have in there, is that based on us charging for?
It was based on the $50 fee for the first container and $200 for the subsequent dumpsters.
So if we decide as a group not to do that, that number is going to go up.
Yes, it would be forced to go up.
It would be better to go with that. Just saying. Just throwing that out there.
If we were to subsidize the entire program as it stands right now, the solid waste fee would need to be increased 25%, and the bill would be $20.25 per month.
Okay. I, for one, like the plan from last night.
You did.
Okay, this is
Denise,
how yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
So what is the average resident with everything that we've just looked at? What's their increase for all of these things?
Right, that would be this. So it would be a decrease of $9.60 per month for
In the
winter
winter.
use. Summer is like, there's no way for me to know that really. I mean, it just depends on
Their
how they
usage.
use water. Yeah.
Okay.
But we are reducing their base fee like we had talked about,
Yes.
which I like. Okay.
Yes.
Which
Thank
is
you.
fine, but in the summertime, those same people that complained about high rates are going to be having even higher rates this summer. So just be prepared.
You're 100% right.
They're not they're not going to have the higher rates this summer because the rates don't take
Oh.
effect until October, correct?
You're right. They'll have
So-
rates similar to what they had last year if
Yeah.
their water use is similar.
But and just as a comment, beyond, I know that you've got the 2% water, you know, the across the board water rate planned in for the next 5 years.
Mhm.
The one thing that I would like to have a discussion on is, should that be a 2% across the board, or should we start and this is where I'm going, is increasing the higher tiers to pay for the water use to encourage more conservation. And I'm not sure that we've had those discussions, but I think that some of those discussions may be worthwhile as we get past the budget and a couple other things, because I would like, I'm not sure that I want to raise them, 2% across the board if we've got a ton of water users that are wasting water, and the people who are wasting water ought to be paying more for that. And that should be part of our water conservation plan. And I know we're going to be looking at that later on this summer or early fall, but that may be just something that we talk about when we do that.
The thing I'm worried about, quite honestly, is that block 2. We are almost constantly using more than our allotment of 120% of our purchase. And so if that continues, I've not had a block 2 rate. And so I need to see how that's going to affect us this summer. And then we may need to adjust the projections based on that as well. But I should easily be able to run some analysis on summer use, like in October-ish, and know who are our highest water users based on their parcel size, and then maybe be able to set the rates based on that kind of a thing as well.
And that's a good point, Denise, because simply because somebody uses more water doesn't mean they're wasting.
Right.
It could be really used, not due to their circumstances or where they have, or their business.
Really, really dirty people.
Well,
or farmers.
I do have to tell you, I know that when I sat down with Denise earlier this year and we saw a couple of residential users' water bills, a couple of them were very scary. One of them we actually think should have been a commercial water user based on the location and their name and the fact that they probably run a business with that water. But there were a couple of residential, Denise, didn't we have a couple of residential users upwards of 150, 200? It just seemed like on a quarter acre lot, somebody was running 150, 200,000 gallons. And to me, that's a lot of water on a quarter acre land.
Or an indoor garden.
We should just let our parks tan this year. You know, we all go out and try to tan in the sun. Let's just let our grass tan.
Oh,
nice light shade of tan. Be a new thing. We could set a trend.
All right. I know that we prepared for 2 hours or more, but I think that I have completed everything that we can do, or that I finished so far. When you get the mayor's budget, a couple of things that we'll want to go over in detail or have a meeting on, and that would be the city's capital project funds, which I haven't gone all the way done yet, but we will have done before, obviously. We'll want to have a specific meeting to look at the parks capital fund, the buildings capital fund, and the road capital fund, and talk about how much money is in there or not in there. And then what projects we have scheduled and what the funding sources for those projects are. I think those are important for you to know. And then we will talk about the redevelopment agency. There's not a lot of activity in there going on outside of what has gone on in the past. And then, so we'll have the RDA, the MDA. One of the other ones we will need to talk to you about will be the Highlands Special Assessment District as well. We've got some, we hope we have some solutions for that, that area. So we've got some work to do after you receive the mayor's budget, but we hope that we've collaborated with you. I know some of the feedback we received was a couple comments, you hate the budget process. I hope we'll make this easier by having gone through all of this together, maybe educated you. And I hope that we're representing a collaborative team approach between the council and the mayor, and that we're giving you a responsible budget that's financially sustainable moving forward and anticipatory of inflation and rate increases, but being very transparent in that. We'll also want to do some work session on the consolidated fee schedule. So I've got the department submitting all of their changes to fees. They would be based on inflationary increase or cost recovery, but we would want to go through that together as well. So we still have some work to do together after you receive the budget, but we hope that we've come most of the way with you. So thank you for your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Denise. If you could stop sharing your screen, I'll take it back. Let's see. All right, so next item we have is, let's see, where did we go? There we go, remarks. The thing on the bottom is wrong. After remarks is a closed session. As far as remarks, so last night I mentioned that we'd probably want to have additional conversations after we receive the mayor's budget. We do need to find a good time to have those. So we'll chat, Kelvin and I will chat with the mayor's staff to find out what dates would look good for them. I want to make sure that the council has an opportunity to receive it, time to digest it, and then we can have additional conversations. So we'll be reaching out offline to see if there's a willingness from the council to schedule something, and if so, what dates would work well. Are there any other remarks from the council this evening?
The absence of remarks does not mean it was an unremarkable presentation.
Definitely agreed. Thank you. You're always so.
All right.
I really appreciate you guys filling in for me. Thank you.
So the last item that we've got this evening is a closed session. We just have the one item to be discussing and would look for a motion to move to closed session and then adjourn from there.
We have to, I think there's actually two, but the
That's right.
first
have to suspend the rules. Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to make a motion to suspend the council rules, and so that we can go into closed session in an electronic format.
I'll second it if I have to. I mean, if somebody has to, I'll do it.
Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Worthen. Any discussion to the motion? Let's do a roll call vote just to be safe, since this is tied to a closed session. So let's vote.
Okay, so Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yep.
Councilmember Jacob,
Affirmative.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
and Councilmember Pack.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Since I'm on a roll, I'll make a motion that we move to a closed session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, and then adjourn from there.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Lamb. Any discussion to the motion? Let's vote.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Council Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes in closed session. Thanks, everyone.
And just as a
Chris.
reminder, that's that separate link for the separate meeting.
We have to
that
leave
you
this.
should all
We have to leave
have.
this, right?
Yeah, there's a separate invite that was sent from Alan for that one.
Thank you.